Good afternoon. Don't look now, but the Astros look like the Astros. Oh, wait, did I mention Michael Brantley looks good in his rehab start? MLB, you are so screwed. We're going to talk about it next on Stone Cold Stros, starting right now.
The Houston Astros, world champions!
Welcome into Stone Cold Stros. I'm Brandon Strange. Charlie Palillo is the man in the middle. Follow him on Twitter at Palillo and read his weekly column on sportsmap.com. Next to him is sportsmap.com editor and ESPN Houston host Josh Jordan. Follow him on Twitter at JoshJordan975. Charlie, Josh, welcome in.
Well, you know, Joe Davis, the voice on that World Series ending call there, his day job is the television voice of the Los Angeles Dodgers. So maybe your opening words flustered him in that whole stinger to start the show today.
Perhaps. River guys, their audio version of this podcast is available at Apple, Google, Spotify, and more. Remember, when you're not watching Sports Map content, make sure you're listening to our sister platform, ESPN 97.5 and 92.5 FM in Houston. Guys, let's get right into it. The theme from this early part of the 2023 season is 2-out runs, or at least that's what I'm taking away from it. It's not a thing I can prove, but just know to be true that a not small portion of the Astros runs so far seem to be scored with 2 outs. And if you told me they led the league in that stat, I'd assume you were correct as well. Again, I don't have those numbers. And the man that really seems to be just coming through in clutch performance after clutch performance is Yordan Alvarez. Most recently, not just scoring runs late in innings, but also late in games. And right now, there's not a more dangerous hitter on the planet than Yordan, in my estimation. I understand that there's a substantial market difference between here and New York, and there was an element of free agency mixed into it. But Aaron Judge's extension was this huge thing, both in hype and in price tag. Yordan's extension went so far under the radar that the Talking Baseball guys, when they were talking in the postseason last year, they hadn't even realized that an extension had been reached with Yordan. So I want to ask you about that before we get started.
That's true.
What's that?
That's true.
Yeah, no.
Doing a quote-unquote major baseball show, had no idea that one of the great offensive forces in the game had signed a 6-year extension in the middle of the season.
I am not making it up. No, that's absolutely true. Again, like, I understand that, especially those guys in particular, their focus is on New York most times. But yeah, they had not realized during the postseason coverage, earlier in the postseason at the least, that he had not signed an extension with the Astros. Imagine their surprise and disappointment when they found out what that deal was. Let's talk about that deal before we get into our other stuff. Could Yordan Alvarez, like, if he stays on this trajectory, could Yordan Alvarez be the most team-friendly contract in Houston sports history, if not MLB history?
We probably need to do a little digging on that, but let's say it gets a seat at the head table. If Yordan's career trajectory is what it is, given good health. This guy doesn't turn 26 years old until the end of June. Postseason is a separate category and one that overwhelmingly favors Yordan. Aaron Judge was a better player the last couple of years than Yordan Alvarez, ... until the playoffs arrived. Right. But Aaron Judge is 31 years old. So Judge's extension with the Yankees, and of course, it's a fundamental difference. Judge was on the market. The San Francisco Giants and San Diego Padres actually offered him more money than the Yankees ultimately signed him for. No one had a chance to get a bite at the apple with Yordan Alvarez. But Judge, who turns 31 years old this week, 9 years, $360 million. That's not calculus. $40 million per year. His age is 31 through 39 seasons. So Yordan, 6 years, will round up to 115 million. That's under 20 million per year, covering Yordan seasons 26 through 31. The age season, they go with July 1st, roughly the midpoint of the schedule. So Yordan's more than 5 years younger than Aaron Judge. Judge has been awesome in the regular season. No one would rather have Aaron Judge over the next 6 years than Yordan Alvarez over the next 6 years, unless Alvarez x-rays turned out to be Correa-like that scotched his contracts first with the Giants and then the Mets. So that Judge is making $40 million per for the next 6 years, while Yordan is not making $20 million for the next 6 years. Yes, there's the free agent versus still under team control, but that is just a whopping difference when any logical future bet for who is better over the next 6 years, the guy who'll be 31 at the end of those 6 years or the guy who'll be 36 plus at the end of those 6 years.
Yeah, I mean, go ahead.
No, game, set, match. Of course it's Yordan.
Yeah, we'll go with Yordan.
Guarantee it'll work out that way. Maybe Aaron Judge, a hulking player that generally is not projected to age well deeply into his 30s. But by 35, if he's still an absolute beast, good for him. But no one honest, intellectually, much less emotionally, leave Yankee fans out of it, would rather have Aaron Judge over the next 6 years at $40 million per year than Yordan Alvarez at under $20 million per year.
Yep, I'm with Charlie there. It certainly is nice to be on the other side of this. We remember the Carlos Lee deal back in the day with the Astros and being kind of stuck with that. So now when you're on that other side of it, you got a great player, you got him locked up at a reasonable number. I mean, how can you complain about that? I think what's been so impressive this year, I pulled the stat from the Chronicle. He's 4 for 5 at the plate with the bases loaded this season. And in those plate appearances, 12 RBI, including a grand slam, and then Sunday's 2-run double. So not to mention he's the RBI leader in the American League. What a start for Yordan.
And the thing about Yordan, who anytime it's been a clutch spot, he seems almost automatic. He's not hot. He hasn't really gone on a jag yet, right? He starts the week batting .253.
Right.
He's just been unreal. Runners in scoring position, 9 for 20. That's a nifty 450. Runners on base, the average is good. He must be bored when he comes up and there's no one on base to drive in. Of course, any swing with Yordan delivers the opportunity to drive in himself. But when no one is on base through the Atlanta series for the season, Yordan's 6 for 36, just 167. So you add it all up, right, 253 average. Anyone going to bet Yordan's only hitting 253 come season's end? His OPS 100 points lower than it finished last year. Anyone think it's going to finish that way? So he's leading the Galaxy in runs batted in 27 and having only played in 20 of the Astros' first 22 games and getting to those 27 ribbies. And the man hasn't gotten hot yet. He's been white hot and then some in the so-called clutch or late and close spots. But overall, Yordan Alvarez has not gotten on one of those just terrorizing all pitchers, any circumstances, jags yet this season. And to the point you made in the opening remarks, Brandon, basically all teams score more runs with 2 outs than with 0 or 1. You have more opportunity to get base runners and so on and so forth. But the Astros have been really good in those spots. And late in games, they're lapping the field. Runs they've scored 7th inning and later, they're double digits ahead of whoever's second right now.
Yeah, go ahead, Brandon.
I was just going to say the broadcast team was throwing around a stats, I think from Baseball Savant, that was saying how Yordan performs in high leverage situations. He's like basically has like a 2 dot something OPS in high leverage situations. So, and basically as they were saying that during the broadcast, Yordan was again coming through with some heroics. Josh, go ahead.
I was just going to say there's room for him to get better. To Charlie's point, he is tied for the league in strikeouts on this team with Jeremy Pena at 25. So if Yordan gets that under control a little bit, man, the sky's the limit.
And this speaks, I guess, both sides of the coin, the concept of protection behind you in the batting order. Yordan basically has had 0 this season. Jose Abreu in the cleanup spot in all 22 of the Astros' 22 games through the Atlanta series. Abreu basically has been a stiff. He's hardly drawn any walks. He's still a 98-pound weekly, 3 doubles. That's it in the extra base column. So that's 1 home run in his last 77 games. 1 in 55 to end it with the White Sox last year. 0 for 22 to start it with the Astros. So great hitters are going to do their damage. There are particular spots where you'll get bypassed, right? Why would you ever pitch to Yordan if you can work around him to Abreu? But with Alex Bregman, the batting average still not where he wants it by any means. But with the walks that he draws, if you get traffic on the bases, you're going to pitch around Yordan Alvarez if there's already a couple of runners on. So, if Abreu can become at all competent, right, or maybe it's time to bench him for a day or two. Why has he been in the lineup in the cleanup spot every day so far this season? Protecting, splitting the lefties, overrated. Yordan and Kyle Tucker should be batting 3-4 in this lineup. Abreu needs to be pushed down.
Yeah, ask Minter what he thinks about Yordan hitting against lefties. I'm not sure before I do that, I just want to say the Astros social media team continues their excellence too, because after Yordan turned the game upside down against Minter, they tweeted, "Do you ever think about August 1st, 2016, which of course was the day that the Astros traded for Yordan Alvarez for basically nothing." Now, speaking of that, and I also want to touch on Abreu as well. Abreu, for those keeping and for those looking for the silver linings, the people who are familiar with his game continue to tweet. This is just how he starts off the season, and that he is actually doing better batting average wise than he was this time last season. I will say, I don't know that means while the batting average may come back up, I don't necessarily project that the power numbers are going to follow. But I want to change topics for a little bit. Not sure if you caught Dana Brown on the TV broadcast over the weekend, but they asked him about the value that Houston has found in Latin pitchers. This kind of ties into the Yordan thing just a little bit, just, them finding value. They were talking about how Astros have found this great success in finding some undervalued older Latin prospects. And Brown said, "Yeah, I was watching the postseason last year and that stat came up. So I took a screenshot and sent it to my coworkers with the Braves and asked, how do they do that? Aren't we all looking for the same talent?" So that combined with Yordan, the Astros have found a way to be able to produce superstars as well as supportive players, as Shaq calls them, the others. So let's talk about the Houston's others. What's wild about their ability to plug and play is they continue this, to have this massive attrition of big stars and big names, and they continue to, even in the case of injuries this season, they've seemingly been able to tread water, if not make hay, with these other guys who you wouldn't expect. In addition to Mauricio Dubon, who, it's well documented, is just playing out of his mind during this hitting streak. Corey Julks was a surprise to make the team. And then a surprise to become one of the most productive hitters in the lineup, with his average at this point well above 300, his OPS above 800. And don't sleep on Jake Myers, who's hitting 375 over his last 7 games. But like I said in the open, Brantley's ever close to returning. And we also know Altuve ahead of schedule, as reported over the weekend. So when these guys come back, who are going to be the odd man out? I guess we'll start with who's the odd man out when Michael Brantley comes back. Obviously, there's a lack of depth with McCormick on the injury list as well. But let's start with Brantley. Who's going to be the odd man out on this roster?
Well, you'd think whichever outfielder gets back first between Brantley and McCormick, Bannon goes down. He's not really thought of as a major leaguer, kind of not worried about getting playing time. So he's a spare part on the bench who they called up when McCormick went to the 10-day IL. So that was infielder up when outfielder down. So I would think, since Bannon has no role really on the team, that covers the first one. But then the plot thickens because you have a glut of outfielders, none of whom are falling on their faces that you say, well, that's the guy you send down. as recently as a week ago, I think the motion would have carried pretty easily. All those who think Jake Myers should be headed for Sugar Land say aye. Well, Jake Myers has tweaked his startup into his swing. He's on a 6-game hitting streak. His overall numbers now are very credible. But you can't have everyone on your bench be a backup catcher or an outfielder, right? David Hensley has been for hunger at the plate so far. So if you were going to look purely at the numbers and say, all right, who has to go down? It would be Hensley. But he's gotten a couple starts the days that Abreu is designated been the designated hitter. Hensley gets that start at first base. Obviously, he can play the other infield positions in a pinch or need be in a given game, as well as they can stick him in left field. Unless I've missed something, right? Corey Julks is not an infield option. Myers, obviously not. McCormick, obviously not. Left-handed throwers for starters. So, how do they choose to balance their roster? It's not as if the Astros have always carried 3 catchers in the past. So maybe Salazar is the other guy who goes down. But geez, with Julks coming through, including in a couple of clutch spots, I'd say 2-out game-winning hit in the 9th inning and the finale in Atlanta is fairly clutch. And with Myers' reawakening, do you want to kick him in the head? On the other hand, there can't be playing time for all these outfielders, even if you keep them, right? If you have Tucker, McCormick, Myers, Yordan, Brantley, Julks, right? You have 3 outfielders and a DH. That's still 2 guys who are going to be sitting every day. So I guess this would be in the good problem to have category, except for the guy who ultimately gets sent down.
Yeah, for me, it's got to be either Hensley or Salazar. The guy I don't want to go down is Julks, because even when Brantley comes back, I think they're going to be careful with him. Maybe it'll be a platoon situation for a while as Brantley's getting used to playing every day again. I could see something like that happening. So that's what I would want to do. I want to leave Julks up here, give him some at-bats. He's been fantastic. And, I thought about it today. I've seen some comments in there about, some of the batting lineup stuff like that. I'm curious to see how the lineup's going to be when Brantley returns, if they're going to just put him in that 2-hole and then move everybody down, or if they're going to decide that, a lefty after a lefty isn't the end of the world. So that'll be something to monitor. But yeah, good problems to have, man. That the young guys are playing great. Don't mess with it. Don't tinker with it. We'll see what happens with Chaz, how soon he gets back. That'll be a big part of it.
Yeah, I don't think there's a need for 3 catchers if you want to have the extra outfielders stay on the merits. Then again, other than Maldonado, there's really no one in this lineup that you're saying, oh, he's crying out to be pinch hit for.
Mm-hmm.
Other than some platoon situations, when you have Brantley here, if you're in a 7th inning with a tough righty on the mound, well, then maybe you hit for Myers or you hit for McCormick if Brantley's not starting that game. But, Yainer Diaz has 22 at-bats through the Astros' first 22 games. The Astros start the week still undefeated in games that Maldonado does not start. Their obsession with playing him 4 out of every 5 games is silly. You don't count on him for offense, but actually it's been worse than it's ever been so far. His mobility behind the plate is down. I've already reached my quota of seeing him throw from his knees, trying to catch base stealers and not even come close. The Machete's arm isn't that good, and you can't get the velocity on the throw from your knees that you can from popping up out of your crouch. And, oh, by the way, you're trying to throw out runners when the distance between first base and second base is shorter now. So Diaz should be getting more run behind the plate because Maldonado shouldn't be catching over 100 games, period, at this point in his career. And if you're going to give Yainer a chance to sink or swim a little bit, you got to put him in the water. Not just give him an at-bat or a start every 5 games or every 4 games. And then, oh, by the way, once in a while, go pinch hit against the closer in the 9th inning and see what you can do there. Of course, that has nothing to do with the outfielder. So sorry for straying from the topic.
No, and we should talk about that too. I want to touch on the Diaz-Maldi conversation, but before I just want to weigh in on the odd man out. I do think it's Salazar, but not because he's done anything bad, performative, but he's just because it's the numbers game. Am I the only one who's getting some Commander Cody vibes from David Hensley? We had a lot of opining for seeing David Hensley more in the lineup. And for those who don't get the reference, Cody Carlson is the backup quarterback from way back in the day, Oilers. And there was a lot of lamenting about why doesn't Cody Carlson get more playing time. And then when you saw Cody Carlson play, he looked just like a backup quarterback, which is a guy who should be a backup. David Hensley is a guy who, again, jury's still out on David Hensley, but not nearly as productive as you'd hoped early on. Again, it's a long season. We're not making any rulings, but I did think that there's a backup quarterback syndrome that happens with some of the pitch hitters and small sample sizes. Again, really good at working a walk in certain situations, but I'll be the first to admit I fell into that group. I do like what we're seeing out of Jake Myers, and Charlie, to your point about the Maldi Diaz situation. This is his last. I understand. Okay, his contract vested, so he gets another year. This is why he's here. I understand he works well with the pitching staff. I'm seeing the same things you are. You have to figure out what the future of your catcher position is after this year, and it's going to be either Diaz or blanking on his name.
Corley.
Yeah. So I think you need to see Diaz. You need to know what you have there with him, not only because of that, but because he has higher upside with the bat. It's worth more to you to get his bat going than it is for whatever you're going to get out of Maldi. You've called him catcher Yoda, but I don't really know what they expect to see out of Maldi. You know what you have with him. He's there. I think Diaz needs to get more reps. You need to see what you have there. And it concerns me that they're not giving him more exposure. Maybe the plan is to give him more reps later on. Don't really know. Josh, where do you fall into that?
Well, we talked about this a little earlier that, with the PitchCom stuff, we've seen a lot of dominating performances, even against the Astros with, starting pitchers calling their own pitches, calling their own games. So do you really need Maldi there just to do that? If his defense is now, I think Diaz is starting to look better behind the plate to me. I'm starting to see the age a little bit with Maldi. Perhaps he's just, banged up a little bit. That happens and they don't talk about it, but I'm starting to see some more slippage from him. So do you really need him there just to call pitches? I don't think so.
Yeah, I'm not saying release him, but if he's on pace to catch 115 games, that's just nonsense. I think it was 110 he caught last year, second behind only Sean Murphy, then of the A's, now of the Braves. And, the Astros have good pitchers. Hunter Brown's a rookie. Other than that, they're not babes in the woods. I don't see them melt down or become village idiots without a clue of what they're trying to do on the mound if Maldonado's not behind the plate. Hey, he's been a terrific receiver and obviously has been revered by a lot of guys. But for the betterment, not only of the Astros ascertaining what do they have for 2024 behind the plate, could well be for the betterment of the 2023 team.
Right.
And if Maldonado is to get to what you'd consider an acceptable overall better level of play, he is turning 37 years old over the summer, and you don't want to be wearing him down anyway. His workload should be lessening even if he was playing really well. But with his work behind the plate, having suffered so far this year, he starts the week with the batting average of 160. The OPS, even by Maldonado standards, is really, really low. I mean, let's face it. They won the game Sunday by pinch hitting for Maldonado in the ninth inning with Corey Julks.
Right.
Which, let me throw in on Julks. And again, such small sample size. I'll two for this. Almost every hitter will tell you, regular or guys who are bench guys, pinch hitting is just really tough to do. You can do jumping jacks, go hit in the cage underneath, but to sit around basically for 2.5 hours and then, hey, go up and get us a clutch hit. It's not like Julks has an extensive resume, but we can think of one very recent, really clutch spot where he came through. If you have a proclivity toward being able to put bat on ball, and that's a guy you want around for the late innings, especially if you're going to be pinch hitting for your catcher anytime you're in a late spot like that. Hensley, meanwhile, 17 strikeouts in 45 at bats. It's that dreaded small sample size thing, right? It's not like Corey Julks is a made man yet. We're talking probably about the same number of plate appearances now for him that Hensley had last year. I just think it's fun for fans, and even if it's not a young phenom, right? Julks is 27, Hensley's 27. But as Astros, right, if this is the team you live and die with and root so hard for, anything that's fresh and new, perchance to dream, and maybe this can make our strong hand even stronger. Sometimes it works out, sometimes it doesn't. Gravitational pull. Mauricio Dubon, incredible run that he's on. I doubt he's going to make it as a 320 hitter this year. It would be something, though, if a week and a half from now, the second baseman with the longest hitting streak in Astros history, a franchise that's had Bill Doran and obviously Jose Altuve and that Hall of Fame dude, Craig Biggio, the actual record holder, Jeff Kent, 25 in a row. If somehow Mauricio Dubon was to stretch this out another week and a half, I'd bet the under on that, but at least he's in the sentence now with the longest second base hitting streaks in Astros history.
Yeah, it is odd. And I guess while we're talking about small sample sizes and catchers, Corey Lee, I don't know if we mentioned this, isn't really knocking the cover off the ball in AAA either. So you do really need to know, Charlie, to your point, it does behoove you to know what you have in Diaz right now, because it may be critical in the 2023 season. We saw Maldi had, 2 nagging injuries that went into the postseason that he was able to play through. But if, the whole talk when Click signed Vasquez was, you needed that insurance policy, where right now, Diaz appears to be your insurance policy. You need to pay a, premium on it to find out whether you can cash that thing in later on down the line. Again, just looking at what you could have had with Vasquez, I digress. But I will say this, literal books have been written about the cutthroat culture of the Astros and Jim Crane and his demand for excellence. They should be writing books about the culture of developing guys and how you get more out of less, because Mauricio Dubon's only another name on the list of guys who you're able to rely on. Right now, Jeremy Pena seems to be in the throes of kind of a scuffle right now. But I mean, that guy was white hot during the playoffs, and you didn't even miss a beat after losing Carlos Correa. So I wish that the national media attention would focus on that a little bit too, is how the Astros can bring up seemingly regular guys or work with them and turn them around and get maximum production out of that. And so another organization that is known for that as well are the Tampa Bay Rays. Astros' burst of winning, combined with some luck of the schedule makers, Houston finds themselves on a collision course against Tampa. And Tampa's losses are in the single digits at this point. Astros are doing their typical slow ramp up. But when it's all said and done, who's going to be the better of these two teams?
I think the Astros have the better roster, top to bottom. The Rays, maybe they're just going to have one of those seasons, and they wind up winning 106, 107 games that we've seen the Astros post in separate seasons over the last 5 years. The Rays are good. They are deep. I presume our Rays fan listenership, viewership's not burgeoning. But let me rain on their parade a little bit anyway. They are really good. They manufacture pitching, it seems like, out of thin air, both starting pitchers and bullpen guys. They set the major league record for most consecutive games from opening day forward, hitting at least one home run in all of them. But if you lead the major leagues in runs scored and fewest runs allowed, you're pretty good. But their schedule, enough cupcakes for diabetes in, about 22 games worth of schedule. I jotted it down so I make sure I had them in order. By series, the Rays opponents before they hooked up with the Astros: the Tigers, who are 7-13, the Nationals, who are 7-14, the A's, who are 4-18, the Red Sox, last place team in the American League East. Now, the American League East is fantastic, so last place at 12-11. Nevertheless, last place. The Blue Jays, they lost 2 out of 3 to the Blue Jays. The Reds, 7-15. The White Sox, 7-15. So they have fattened up on empty calories. Now, there's plenty to be said for that, right? The Astros struggled in a couple series against teams that you're thinking, hey, whip up on them. But the Rays have not gone through the crucible of 3 weeks straight of divisional games, or just playing better caliber opponents series after series. Whereas the Astros, it's like the smelling salts where, we're playing teams worthy of being on the field with us. Now we're going to start playing ball. So the Rays are very good. And, they posted a 100-win season a couple of years ago. But I want to see more than one awesome month. It's kind of like the Rays with more pedigree than Corey Julks. But Corey Julks and Mauricio Dubon, one good month doesn't mean they're going to be all-stars. The Rays I don't see as some sort of unbeatable juggernaut. And, The Astros traditionally have not fared well in St. Petersburg. Well, last September they went in there and swept 3. So the Astros are king of the mountain until someone takes them down in October.
Yeah, Astros do what they do. They play well against good teams. They play down to their competition a little bit. Doesn't worry me. Wake me up when the Rays are in the playoffs in these games for all the marbles. Give me the Astros until somebody knocks them off.
Well, and record means nothing. The Astros, Charlie, as you said, typically play down to their competition. And your point about the smelling sauce is no more clear than when they took the Rays to 7 games in, I believe it was 2020, during that weird season where they had barely finished over 500 at 500. And then took the Rays to, they had no business being that after going down 3-0, taking them to 7 games, but that's just what they do. And right now, Tampa is an on pace guys fantasy. If you haven't learned your lesson though, here's a good reminder. June 13th of last year, the Yankees were on pace to win 119 games, and they only needed to win on an 89 win pace the rest of the season to win 100 games, and they still fell short of that. So I do take the Rays serious. They are always a threat to come out of nowhere and contend, but let's see what they look like once they face some adversity. It's easy to front run. It's far more difficult to sustain excellence. The Astros are that they are the epitome of sustained excellence. So let's see, where do we want to go after this? Well, I do want to talk about, we mentioned it a little bit briefly though. Altuve, Dana Brown mentioned that he was ahead of schedule and returning. Dana Brown also mentioned that he's confident that he can re-sign both of those guys, even though talks haven't begun. I'm not going to hold my breath, considering the rope-a-dope from the preseason about Fromber and Tucker, but I thought it would as a good way to tie into our bottom line question of the week. So if you're watching us live and haven't commented yet, now is your chance. It's the bottom line question of the week. I'll pose it to Charlie and Josh, but everyone gets to answer, and there is a delay on the feed. And so when we get your answers, it may be a little bit after. So go ahead and start tweeting now. I'll give you the question, and we'll let you guys respond after Charlie. I'll read your guys' responses after Charlie and Josh give me their feedback. So Charlie, Josh, Dana Brown says he feels confident about re-signing and extending Jose Altuve and Alex Bregman. Which deal gets done first?
Well, I guess all Dana Brown can say is that, right? It wouldn't make any sense for him to say, yeah, we're probably not too worried about signing this guy, or if it's one or the other, we want that guy, or the die is cast, we're so far apart, when you're still 2 years from free agency. I will go Altuve. Couple of reasons. One, Altuve he's the tent pole of this era, right? He goes back to the dark days. I think Jim Crane doesn't strike me as overly sentimental, but if you're going to have one of those two guys never play in another big league uniform, that Altuve is 34 years old when he hits free agency, so no way is he looking, what is he going to get, a 7, a 9, 11-year deal, whereas Bregman at 30, looking at last offseason, his template's probably thinking, well, they're paying guys till 40, 41 at mega dollars, so where's mine? But Alex Bregman, who's maybe kicking it into gear now, but if he doesn't lift from where he's been fairly significantly, this is 4 years in a row that Alex Bregman's been a good player, not a great player. Right? 2019 was the last time Alex Bregman was a great player. Jose Altuve was great last year. And then you have components like, okay, if the Astros aren't just cranking out pennant winner after pennant winner 4 or 5 years from now, but you have Jose Altuve chasing down 3,000 hits and still is the most beloved player in franchise history, or maybe by that point will be. So I could see maybe a 3 or 4 year extension getting done for Altuve, whereas I would think Bregman's looking for 7, 8, 10 because so many teams have been handing those out like candy.
Yep, I'm with Charlie for the reasons he just laid out right there. I think Altuve.
Damn it, Josh, we need a good old-fashioned fight on something.
I know, right? I can't help it on this one because
can't be great minds think alike. All right, we're rolling that out.
I'll take that as a compliment. But yeah, for what you just said, Altuve, it feels like he's going to be here, and Bregman can probably go get another mega deal. So that just seems like what might happen, unless Breggy's willing to take another discount. I'm not so sure So yeah, give me Altuve.
I'll go with Altuve as well, just to make it unanimous across the board, unanimously boring, but also unanimous in our response, because for a lot of the same reasons. Jose Altuve has said he wants to be an Astros lifer, and more than most, I believe him. I don't believe this is posturing. I believe he truly wants to be an Astros lifer. The Astros gave him the opportunity when other teams would not, and they've made him a superstar. They've platformed him to a level which he could have never imagined, and he's repaid them by helping them get 2 championships here. He's, before we started talking about the clutch gene in Yordan, Altuve was the OG clutch guy on this team. And that's not, there's a long storied history in Houston with their baseball. We've suffered through a lot of it here. And a lot of that did not include clutch. And so Altuve brought something very, very different to the table. And this generation of Astros players and this organization brings something very different to the table, which is being able to perform those big moments. It's not just about having numbers and being nice to the fans and Bible study and, saying your prayers and eating your vitamins like Hulk Hogan. It's, this team is, they put up and shut up. And so it's really awesome to see. And that sustained excellence. That's just really what I'll always remember this generation of Astros by. And guys, I'm going to get on my soapbox just for a quick second here and say, if you don't appreciate what's going on right now in Houston, then shame on you, because an Astros run like that, an MLB team run like this is so rare. And this sort of sustained excellence and being able to dominate for this long at this level is just unheard of. And so shame on you if you're not taking advantage of it now. Buy all the merch, support your team, because when it's bad, it's bad. And if you need any further evidence, just look at the other 2 pro sports teams in this town. Okay, let's get on to reading your responses here to our bottom line question of the week. I'm going to start with Michael H. He says Altuve because he wants to remain an Astros for life. That's what I said. Good stuff. Arlie says Altuve. Jay Roberts says Altuve. Eric Hanlon says Altuve. James says Altuve. David, Altuve. Larceny, Altuve. Red Pill Pastor says neither because inflationary bear market, a different beast for contracts. Perhaps, but I think Altuve is going to be able to find a way, but we will see. Yeah, the Bregman contract could certainly fall victim to inflation as well. Gregory Guru says Altuve. Astro Wharf Craig says Altuve. Chris says Altuve.
Does anyone not say Altuve other than the guy who said neither?
Yeah. I'm going to read them because I appreciate the interaction, but it does look like anonymous Altuve, or excuse me, unanimous Altuve responses. Gregory Guru says Bregman's play discipline. Oh, that's not, I don't know why that starred. And that seems to be Eric says Altuve wants to give the money to pay for Tucker. So yeah, let's do that. Well, guys, I appreciate it. That's going to be another one in the books for Stone Cold Stros. I want to thank my host, Charlie Palolo and Josh Jordan. And I want to thank everybody who was interacting with the show live. We had a record crowd as far as in season goes. So it just goes to show you as the Astros go, so does the viewership of the podcast. But we appreciate everybody joining us this week. We'll be back here next week, 3 p.m. for Stone Cold Stros. Until then, go Astros.